from the studios of Farm Journal Broadcast.
Coming up on AgDay, the dicamba debate continues as producers take in mandatory training. A fresh cattle on feed report puts inventory sky high. And agribusiness prepping for planting.
Well, the market's is nervous. It's a little too long. It's got a lot of focus on weather.
Machinery Pete looks at Q1 used equipment values and beautifying a concrete canvas in Australia.
AgDay, brought to you by the Chevy Silverado, the most dependable, longest-lasting full-size pickups on the road.
Good morning, I'm Clinton Griffiths. Planting progress has been slow so far during this cold start to spring, but the debate over the use of dicamba is already heating up, and now one state's ban on using the chemistry is being reversed. There's some confusion in Arkansas whether farmers can actually use dicamba this year. The Arkansas Plant Board successfully banned the spraying of dicamba from April 16th through October 1st, but a growing number of farmers are fighting the ban. Just this month, various county-level judges granting temporary injunctions blocking the plant board's rule. That opened the door for a number of Arkansas farmers to spray the herbicide. Meanwhile, the state attorney general is working to block the use of dicamba while the appeals process plays out. While some growers can legally use dicamba today, Monsanto telling AgDay that its version, XtendiMax, still isn't available in the state. The company saying there's just too much political uncertainty right now around the product, but they're working to get it into growers' hands next year. Arkansas is the only state that placed an in-season ban on dicamba this year. The EPA approved revised labels for XtendiMax, Fexapan, and Ingenia late last year, but those labels include several changes and vary by state. Well, now listed as a restricted use herbicide, applicators need a license to purchase and apply dicamba products. And as Betsy Gibbon reports, while some in the industry want to see dicamba stay, others are pushing for it to go away.
We can't rely continually on the products that we have had.
A shop becomes a classroom on this farm in Westville, Indiana, a relaxed location.
The 2018 Indiana required training.
Because farmers and applicators who plan to use dicamba products are required to be there.
Here to get some questions answered that we weren't sure about.
Purdue University is helping with some of the training sessions throughout the state.
It's a tool in their toolbox they can use to combat some of these herbicide-resistant weeds.
As some praise the success stories in the battle against resistant weeds.
We had a launch of almost 26+ million acres between cotton and soybeans for the first time introduction of a crop system. And I think that was wildly successful in terms of our weed control and experience. It's not without challenges, though.
Others say there's still work to be done.
I can't really view it as a success given the degree of off-target movement that occurred.
James Parlberg is both a row crop farmer and a tomato grower in Northwest Indiana who understands both sides of the debate. Parlberg has a tomato crop to grow, one that's not salvageable if there's any type of drift or volatility on the field. He's even met with the EPA.
Any evidence of symptoms on a vegetable crop, you have zero tolerance, which means the crop must be destroyed. If it's only a 10% yield reduction, it does not matter. It's 100% destruction.
He believes specialty crops are being ignored.
Our neighbors, you do things together. You go to church together. You go to school, your kids go to school together. And they didn't intend on it. Nobody wants that. Nobody's doing it on purpose. But it's real. It's real life. It happens.
Crop insurance agents say coverage is complicated.
Is drift or volatility covered under federal crop insurance?
The quick, simple answer is no.
Williamson says crop insurance policy covers unavoidable causes of loss from naturally occurring risks like adverse weather, insect damage, and plant disease, not chemical damage. He says one of the only things growers can do is to purchase liability coverage.
Now, if they're concerned about their liability when they spray dicamba, then they need a liability policy to cover that.
With the dicamba products, the maximum wind speed a farmer can spray has been reduced from 15 to 10 miles per hour nationwide.
Was there any key learning last year, though, that like certain tank mixes and things that were causing this product to be more volatile?
Unfortunately, we're still looking, and that's what's really frustrating.
If anybody looks at any product label today, they're going to see a lot of the same restrictions. All the components we see in XtendiMax are there in other product labels as well. It's just for the first time I think we have applicators really reading a product label for something other than the rate.
A mandatory dicamba training.
As crop companies recognize the training,
we are pleased that this applicator training is now part of the mandatory and the RUP, so growers and applicators can understand how to successfully apply engineer.
Soon schooling in the makeshift classroom will turn into real life in the field, as farmers hope education and training lead to success for their neighbors and themselves. Reporting for AgDay, I'm Betsy Gibbon.
Thanks, Betsy. On Friday, Russia granting approval of Bayer's proposed acquisition of Monsanto, the company calling it another milestone in the process. So far, it has received regulatory approvals from about 20 of the approximately 30 authorities needed to close the deal. Bayer says they are hoping to close that transaction in the second quarter of 2018. A new week will bring fresh anxiety for farmers and traders watching the trade spat between the U.S. and China. Well, a new study out of Purdue saying U.S. soybean exports to China could fall by as much as 65% if Beijing follows through on those retaliatory tariffs. China announcing earlier this month that U.S. soybeans could be hit with a 25% tariff if President Trump implements his own tariffs on Beijing for forced technology transfers. Brazil ultimately comes out the winner, according to analysts, although U.S. growers could find other homes for their products.
They'll figure it out. I mean, China needs our soybeans, so there's only so many soybeans in the world, and we're a major producer, so they pretty much need our soybeans. I think they'll get it figured out and it won't really affect anything.
However, some analysts say the posturing doesn't necessarily mean soybean tariffs are a given.
So we get to the negotiating table and we're focused on intellectual properties and cars and things like that. And China says, well, for some soybeans, let's just not talk about intellectual property, but we'll buy 40 million tons of your soybeans, where we're 35 today. And we'll buy a little more ethanol. How's that? And that's an easy one. They're going to buy the ethanol or soybeans anyway. So I think that's an easy concession.
Meanwhile, several ships carrying cargoes of sorghum from the United States to China changed course following news of the anti-dumping deposits announced last week. According to USDA, 20 ships carrying more than 1.2 million tons of sorghum are currently on the water. Reuters reporting at least 5 ships with cargo valued at $216 million changed course within hours of China announcing tariffs on U.S. sorghum. USDA rolling out its latest cattle on feed report late Friday. The report showing the overall number of cattle and calves on feed is up 7% from a year ago. The USDA pegging the herd at 11.7 million head. The Ag Department says this is the second highest April 1st inventory in over 20 years. Placements totaling 1.9 million head, 9% below year-ago levels, and marketings of fed cattle totaling 1.8 million, down 4% from a year ago. Temperatures warming up around the Corn Belt. Mike Hoffman has an update. Today's crop comments. Good morning, Mike.
Good morning, Clinton. We'll start near Hastings, Nebraska, where Randy Ermacher says, quote, finally, sunshine and no wind. He's getting some work done finally in the field that's long overdue. Last week, USDA said 1% of the state's corn had been planted. A year before, it was 3%. A new crop progress report comes out later today. Now, taking a look at the estimated rain from last week, boy, you can see the west didn't get a whole lot, but rain and melted snow totaled up pretty heavy amounts. Southern Mississippi Valley and also the northern Mississippi Valley into the western Great Lakes. And some lighter amounts, but still decent amounts farther east. We'll check your forecast coming up in just a few minutes, but first, here are some hometown temps.
Plan for the unexpected with weather forecast updates. Local forecasts are delivered right to your cell phone each morning, making planning a little bit easier. Just text Weather 6 to 31313 to get started.
We'll talk planning progress and preparing for the week ahead coming up at the Agribusiness Desk. Plus, Machinery Pete is here.
Are used equipment values up or down so far in 2018? Stay tuned and I'll tell you about it.
And grain silos have an important job. Does that include art display? Details as we head in the country.
With a uniquely powerful formulation of proven ingredients, Resicor corn herbicide gives you extraordinary power.
Who wants dessert?
At least when it comes to weeds.
Agribusiness, let's see how markets wrapped up last week. For that, we head to the floor of the CME over in Chicago.
Soybeans were down. It seems that the easing of the weather concerns have really pressured the futures.
Now that the weather is improving, farmers are really ready to begin their planting, and then looking ahead, we're expecting good weather all summer, and that just means that there's going to be more grain, and certainly that's sending the market a little bit lower. We did have a pullback in wheat. Even Kansas City was down double digits. But wheat, improved weather in the U.S. plains has definitely put some pressure on the wheat market. Cattle was mixed. Lower opening really rebounded on higher cash prices and pushed the market up. It actually was very strong and kind of surged right before the close. It seems that the carcass weights were declining a little bit, and that was helping the market up. That's all from the floor at the CME Group here in Chicago. I'm Virginia McGaffey.
Bob Utterback and Brian Basting are our guests here at the Agribusiness Desk today. All right, gentlemen, what did we learn last week? Is there anything specific from the markets that we can take away? And Bob, we'll start with you.
Well, the markets is nervous. It's a little too long. It's got a lot of focus on weather. But we're going to find out how good the farmers are at planting corn. I believe the farmers can plant, almost every farmer I talk to says they can plant all their corn between 6 to 10 days.
Okay. All right, Brian, what did you learn last week?
Yeah, these markets I think are going to be more volatile here in 2018, Clinton, than we've seen the last couple of years. I think there's a lot of recipe, a lot of ingredients there in the recipe for volatility, and we're just seeing it now day to day. Swings in the market we didn't necessarily see, particularly last 2 years.
Okay, Brian, as you get ready for a new week and you start to look out ahead as we wrap up April and start May, what's on your radar, something we really need to be zoning in on?
Well, there's no question that the world's focus is on the planting progress now in the U.S., but I think that the market knows two things. Knows that the U.S. producer can plant a tremendous amount of acreage in a very short period of time now, and has very factored that in, maybe into discounting the weather premium. And the second thing is that we're looking at a lot of volatility in these markets, and I think producers have got to be prepared for volatility. They got to have a plan in place to manage upside and downside.
We've seen some statistics that say, a cold April leads to lower yields overall. Do you think that holds true, Bob, or not? Or is this a different world we live in, different genetics?
Last year on April 22nd, we was 15% planted corn, and we had a record corn crop yield.
Right.
And it wasn't terribly warm last year. So I don't know. We're planting earlier than we normally have a long time. But I guess the key right now is feed buyers, unprotected feed buyers, in a May need to protect against the July weather scare. Grain sellers that have old crop corn, you got to figure out what you're going to do. You've got to set time deadlines, move yourself in June, July. But if the market gives you an opportunity, how are you going to take advantage of it? I think you have to have that plan thought out now. You don't wait until the event occurs, then decide you're going to go to the banker, then get the wife and the managers, everybody figured out. You just won't get anything done. So you got to have your game plan, your game face on before you go to the auction. You know how much you're going to pay for the tractor? Same way here. You got to know how you're going to play the game before the event gets here.
All right, I think Brian agrees. All right, appreciate you both being here. We'll be back with more Ag Day in just a couple minutes.
To talk with Brian one-on-one, call Advanced Trading at 800-664-2314 or head online to advanced-trading.com. To talk with Bob one-on-one, call Utterback Marketing Services, toll free at 800-832-1488.
Welcome back to Ag Day. Meteorologist Mike Hoffman. Mike, we know some of these areas in the drought regions got a little bit of rain over the weekend, but what do we see going forward?
I'm not real hopeful going forward at this point for this week anyway, but there are some possibilities down the road of more cutoff lows kind of coming slowly eastward, but that's going to be after this week. As you can see, the same areas continue to have drought issues. The southwestern plains, especially the panhandles of Oklahoma, Texas, back into the Four Corner region, has continued to get slowly worse, and you can see parts of the southeast, parts of Georgia and South Carolina getting slowly worse. You go back a month, not quite as bad in the southeast and not quite as bad in these drought areas out west, but it hasn't gotten a lot worse just because it was already so dry. But you can see some exceptional areas expanding there in those areas that I was talking about. And unfortunately, this is the precipitation this week. This might help parts of the Georgia, Carolina, South Carolina areas, but you can see from the lakes all the way to the west coast and most of the areas all the way down into Mexico expected to be below normal for precipitation this week, so not a good situation there. But we do have some cutoff energy off out west that may eventually start to come in this weekend or into the following week, so we'll be watching that for you. Temperatures this week, we are looking at below normal for most areas, as you can see, from West Virginia all the way down into eastern portions of Texas, most of Florida. Temperatures above normal then out west in these dry areas. Of course, when you get dry, it's very easy to heat things up because there's really no moisture evaporating into the atmosphere. Also above normal from Maine all the way up through most of eastern portions of Canada. Taking a look at the 30-day outlook for temperatures, we'll go below normal for most of Montana, most of southern Canada, as you can see, northern plains, northern Mississippi Valley, and the northern portions of the Great Lakes. And from the southeast, let's say southern North Carolina, all the way through the Gulf Coast region, most of Texas, and most of the Four Corner region back through California expected to have above normal temperatures. For precipitation over the next 30 days, I'm going above normal for southern Texas, also from New Orleans up most of the East Coast. Near normal for a good chunk of the middle of the country. Now, it's always tough with precipitation over a 30-day period. There will be systems coming through, and some places might get above normal, but we'll go generally near normal for the breadbasket of the country and below normal for the western sections. Unfortunately, that includes parts of the drought areas. Now, we're kind of hoping some of this moisture from Texas makes it farther northward into those eastern portions of the drought areas. That's a look across the country. Now let's take a look at some local forecasts. First of all, for Redding, California, mostly sunny and very warm today, high temperature of 86 degrees. Take a look at Mitchell, South Dakota, increasing clouds and mild, high of 63. And Asheville, North Carolina, cooler today with rain, could be heavy at times, high temperature around 51 degrees.
Machinery Pete is stopping by to share his analysis on used equipment prices from the first quarter. That'll be next. Plus, with a few buckets of paint and plenty of time, you can create some pretty amazing artwork, even on a most atypical canvas. We know Machinery Pete is adamant about tracking equipment sales, and he's rolling out his first quarter index showing used values are on the rise. Here's Pete.
Okay, folks, here's a look at our 2018 first quarter Machinery Pete Used Values Index Report. This is sort of my big picture look at what's happening with used values. It's based on all the auction price data we compile. Now you can see here on my 1 to 10 scale, the current rating is 6.8. And this surprises a lot of people now. It's actually been up for 2 quarters in a row. And to understand this, we actually have to look back 5 years to when commodity prices fell spring of 13. Now you can see at that time, we were an all-time high used index rating of 9.5. Now look what happened in 13, 14, 15. Used values crashed. 2014 was the worst. Late model large used equipment items were falling 15 to 25% year over year. But if you look at what's happened since the end of 15 till now, this is what folks are calling the soft bottom. Used values have stabilized. And to understand why they've gone up, again, look back. It's been 5 years now that we've been in this tough ag economy. So even at this point, if folks don't want to, a lot of folks having to update. And what they're choosing to do in a lot of cases is look to the used market, and what they would like to find is a 1, 2, 3-year-old item, low hours, under warranty. Well, guess what? Not much of that stuff was sold new back when times were tough. So what we're seeing now, when this stuff shows up at auction, like on this March 29th farm auction, North Central Illinois, a 2014 John Deere 8360R, 1,713 hours, sold for $235,000. That's the highest auction sale price in 39 months.
Art comes in many forms, including the shape of a grain silo. Details when we come back.
In the Country, sponsored by Kubota. Tractors, hay tools, utility vehicles, mowers, and more. Visit KubotaUSA.com today.
Grain silos and elevators dot our landscape, and let's be honest, they're rather plain. After all, how fancy does grain storage really need to be? But in southern Australia, you can find a rather scenic silo. A mural painter is changing the landscape of a small Australian town by painting the biggest structure in town, the grain silos. It's a huge surface with an equally big visual impact. A number of rural towns in southern Australia have had murals painted on their grain silos. It'll take about a month for the artist to complete this concrete canvas.
Paint the silos is really challenging for me because it's a very big area. It's a circle surface, it's not flat, and it's very big.
The artist is from Buenos Aires, where he's done similar works of art. Once completed, this project will show 2 local boys jumping into the water to escape the heat. And that's all the time we have this morning. We're sure glad you tuned in. Spend part of your day with us. For Betsy Chippen and Mike Hoffman, I'm Clinton Griffiths. Have a great day.